All right, so we got a pretty wild story here as open socialist candidate for mayor of Buffalo, New York was compared by another Democrat to the former head of the KKK, David Duke. So this is just an absolutely ridiculous story. But before we get into that, I just want to give you a little bit of a precursor in terms of how we ended up in the situation that we are in right now. So this is an article from about 3 months ago. We had a Democratic primary showdown between India Walton and a corporate Democrat, and you see the result here. First of many, socialist India Walton defeats four-term Buffalo mayor in primary upset. And so we get a little bit of a glimpse here in terms of what the phrase vote blue no matter who typically means to corporate Democrats. Okay, so this is the situation that we ended up with after this corporate Democrat lost the race. Did he fall in line with the rest of the Democratic voters who decided that this was their candidate and politely endorse her and then move on with his life? No, he turned around and basically launched a full-scale assault in the form of a write-in campaign where he is basically doing nothing but trying to sabotage the campaign of this socialist India Walton in favor of helping corporate Democrats and Republicans. Okay, so this is the situation that got us to the tense situation that we have right now that has led to this. Okay, so resign or be removed, outrage after top New York Democrat compares Buffalo's India Walton to David Duke. So this is the ridiculous situation that we are in right now. But again, just a reminder that the vote blue no matter who phrase that Democrats always roll out whenever it's a leftist who is threatening the potential chances of a corporate Democrat winning, they never mean it. Okay, it's not vote blue no matter who. It's if you are a progressive or a leftist or a socialist, fall in line with the corporate Democrats. And if you happen to do an upset against a corporate Democrat, then you will not get backed. And in fact, you will have basically the entirety of the Democratic establishment trying to sabotage your campaign. So that's what the phrase vote blue no matter who actually means. It's just a way for them to try to get leftists to fall in line with their agenda. And so here's some of the details. So the chair of the New York State Democratic Party sparked anger, rebuke, and calls for his resignation Monday after comparing India Walton, winner of the party's nomination for Buffalo mayor and a black woman, to notorious racist and white supremacist David Duke. And party chair Jay Jacobs made the remarks during an interview with Spectrum News in which he was asked to explain why he and other top Democrats in the state have refused to endorse or support Walton's candidacy in the general election after she won a surprise victory over longtime incumbent mayor Byron Brown in the primary earlier this year. And here's what Jay Jacobs had to say about India Walton. He says, let's take a scenario very different where David Duke, you remember him, the grand wizard of the KKK, he moves to New York, he becomes a Democrat, he runs for mayor in the city of Rochester, which is a low primary turnout, and he wins the Democratic line. Jacobs said, I have to endorse David Duke? I don't think so. So what the fuck are you even talking about, man? He just completely, entirely constructed a hypothetical, made it up in his head, and then said, well, if it was David fucking Duke, then I wouldn't support him. Okay, but we're not talking about David Duke. In fact, we are literally talking about, in terms of ideology and the actual policy agenda that these two would represent, we are talking about two people who could not be on further ends of the spectrum. Okay, you have a black female socialist and a white supremacist man. These are like the most separate categorized people that you could possibly have. And of course, that's who he chooses to make this analogy with. It's just completely stupid and ridiculous and honestly dangerous. But they continue with this. So while Jacobs acknowledged that Walton and Duke were not in the same category, no shit, and later apologized for the comparison, the reaction from more progressive Democrats in New York was swift, and demands for his resignation were immediately circling around as they started here. But just another perspective in terms of who India Walton is before we get into those responses. So while Jacobs was saying this, right, while he was on that podcast attacking India Walton, India was on the picket line at Mercy Hospital standing with CWA District 1 nurses and hospital workers. That's the kind of person India is. And of course, this is exactly what you would want to see from an actual leader who cares about the average people within their constituency. Okay, she's right there on the picket line, so all credit to her, and obviously being much more productive than some of these corporate Democrats who are spending their time going on podcasts and comparing socialists like India Walton to former heads of the KKK are doing with their lives. So again, we had some responses here from progressive Democrats to this. So Jamal Bowman here weighing in saying it's insane to equate India Walton, a black woman, with David Duke, someone who supports the legacy of lynching black people and the rape of black women. This is the malignant narcissism of far too many white men. Jay Jacobs need to resign or be removed, and that is to say the least. He absolutely should be removed by by the rest of these, by the rest of the New York State Democratic Committee, right? This is exactly the opposite of what it means to be in unity with the rest of the party, right? If they actually want to pretend to believe in vote blue no matter who, then this is the action that they would take, but I doubt that they will actually do that. And of course, we had even some corporate Democrats who were forced into a corner to say that this was a ridiculous comparison. We had here from Chuck Schumer, quote, "The statement was totally unacceptable and the analogy used was outrageous and beyond absurd." Now, pretty important to note here that even though she says thank you, Senator Schumer, and he is condemning this language that was used, Schumer has still not endorsed India Walton. And he was actually asked about this recently in an interview or a press conference, basically, and he completely ignored the question, right? So he has still refused to endorse the person who won the Democratic primary, and this is a major establishment Democrat within the state of New York, so his endorsement would go a long way, and he's still refusing to do so as a corporate Democrat is sabotaging the Democratic Party's chances of actually winning this mayoral race. So it's just completely ridiculous, and again shows you that whenever they say vote blue no matter who, don't listen to them because they're absolute liars and cowards. But we also had Bernie Sanders here jumping in to try to help her out. So Sanders is raising funds for Democratic Socialist candidate in race for Buffalo mayor. So of course Chairman Bernie doing what he can, coming out to bat for India Walton. Love to see it. Some solidarity there from a former mayor of a small town, a former socialist mayor of a small town in Burlington, Vermont, Bernie Sanders. So there's a little bit of crossover there. And actually, if anything, India Walton leading Buffalo would be even larger than when Bernie Sanders was the mayor of Burlington, because the population sizes are dramatically larger. Buffalo is a city of 250,000 people or so. So it would be pretty massive to have a chance for a socialist to prove what socialist policies can do to lift people out of poverty within the city of Buffalo. So I'm really excited, honestly, to see what she can do. But you got the election that is the general election is coming up on November 2nd. So also, in addition to all of this, right, obviously, if you live in Buffalo, go vote for India Walton on November 2nd. Donate to her campaign. Do whatever you can do, because it would be, again, pretty awesome to have this chance to prove democratic socialist policies or socialist policies being able to be effective in a large city like that. She also responded via her own campaign. So she said, "While I was visiting strikers at the picket lines outside of Mercy Hospital in support of their efforts, the New York State Democratic Party chairman, Jay Jacobs, was making crude, indefensible statements, going so far as to make an analogy between me, a black working class mother and activist for fighting for the most vulnerable in our city, and David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. I should not have to defend why I am not in any way comparable to David Duke, a militant white supremacist and an anti-Semite, a man who would celebrate my death. It is mind-boggling that any Democratic Party leader would see it fit to make such an offensive analogy. Jacobs and many corporate Democrats like him are still refusing to endorse our campaign. Despite our primary victory among the Democratic voters, they are allegedly accountable too, and it is clear than ever that they'd rather uphold the status quo than fight for bold progressive vision that works for all Buffalonians." And I've never heard the phrase Buffalonians, but she's absolutely right other than that, right? I mean, this is what it looks like to have an actual leader, right? Somebody who is going out and fighting directly on the picket lines with workers, okay? That's what you want to see. And so again, show solidarity with India Walton. Go support her campaign in any way that you possibly can. Again, the election is coming up on November 2nd, so if you live in Buffalo, go and support and vote for India Walton. But this is just absolutely ridiculous. And again, it cuts straight to the bullshit, right? We understand that neoliberals, that corporate Democrats will side with the right. They will always side with conservatives and even fascists, if it comes down to it, over socialists.